Welcome to the Faith and Feelings podcast. My name is Taylor Joy, and I'm passionate about helping you untangle and honor your emotions, authentically practice your faith, and integrate both into your everyday life so that you can experience the goodness and delight that comes from living in relationship with yourself, God, and others. Thank you for joining me. Let's get started. Author and theologian David Augsburger once said, "Being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost indistinguishable." What it means to listen and love well can be best understood around the unfathomable mystery of the incarnation, that God took on human flesh. God knew that there was no better way to convey his love to human beings than to fully enter their world. And the life of Jesus teaches us three dynamics that characterize what it looks like to incarnate in order to love people well. We must first enter another's world. Second, hold on to ourselves. And third, live in the tension between two worlds. In today's episode, my clinical supervisor, Carley, and I walk through each of these three active listening skills that can help us grow in this everyday practice of loving others well through how we listen. Listen in. Well, Carley, today we are talking about relational skill number 5, which is incarnational listening. And I love this skill so much.
Me too. It's such a helpful one.
Yeah, this skill is all about learning to listen and love well, which Pete Cesaro says can be best understood by looking at the mystery of the incarnation, that God took on human flesh and conveyed his love by entering into our world. So Carley, can you take us into this concept of incarnational listening? How would you describe it to our listeners?
Yeah. I love that language around Jesus entering our world. Because this is what it is, and the idea of what does it look like to enter someone else's world without an agenda, right? Without trying to fix or save or anything like that, but just entering their world, being curious. Think of Jesus' example of this throughout all of the Gospels and how he was so curious. He has so many questions. And really got to know someone else and their experience before ever really guiding in any sort of way. And so this is something that I like to encourage people with, like the fact that we're not really taught how to listen well, right? Listening skills. I mean, we both know this in our grad programs. Like our first semester of grad school, we take a skills class, and we actually are not allowed to ask questions. So we have to practice just listening and reflecting.
Which is a surprise to a lot of people.
Yeah, I know. Right? I think of therapists as like, I come and ask questions and answer. It's like, no, actually we don't.
No.
And what that practice does for us is it allows us to not offer solutions right away, but just to stay present with what's happening in that person. And so that's what this skill is all about. And one of the quotes that he puts in here is that listening is so closely connected to loving that the two are almost indistinguishable. And I love this because that gets us curious about, like, if how I hold space for another person is how they might feel attuned to, and we'll talk about that word in a minute. Like, if that's going to be, wow, that's how they feel loved, then I want to grow in how I listen well. Because so much, I mean, I'll go first in saying that when I first started working with others, I was listening to respond, not just listening to understand. And so I would already be like, I want to stop talking so I can respond to you and tell you what I think or what I think you should do, et cetera, right? And now it's listening to be like, I'm curious about what that's like for you, or wow, that sounds really difficult. And so just the listening skills can really aid to our ability to hold space and enter into another's world like Jesus did, and therefore being like just the essence of Jesus in the world around us.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. A couple years ago, I did a deep dive into the Gospels and noticed that almost every time Jesus had a one-on-one interaction, he began with a question. He led with such curiosity and, like you were saying, a genuine desire to enter into the world of the person he was speaking to. And I think there's so much we can learn from that posture. So to kick things off, we're going to start with a listening test that we thought would be a fun way to begin this episode. So Carley and I are going to go back and forth reading 10 statements that actually assess our ability to listen well. So do you want to start with the first one?
Okay. So the starting point here is just notice the ones that stand out to you. It's like, oh, that's something that I do well. Okay. My close friends would describe me as a responsive listener.
Number 2, when people are upset with me, I am able to listen to them without being defensive.
Number 3, I listen not only to the words people say, but also to the feelings behind their words and their body language.
Number 4, I have little interest in judging other people or quickly giving my opinion to them.
Number 5, I'm able to validate another person's feelings with empathy.
Number 6, I am aware of my defensive mechanisms in stressful conversations like appeasing, ignoring, blaming, or distracting.
Number 7, I'm profoundly aware of how the family I was raised in has shaped my present listening style.
Number 8, I can ask for clarification when listening rather than filling in the blanks or making assumptions.
Number 9, I don't interrupt to get my point across when another is speaking.
And number 10, this is the last one. I give people my undivided attention when they are talking to me. Those are so good.
Yeah, and then at the end of this, it says if you circled 8 to 10 statements, you're an outstanding listener. If you circled 6 to 7, you're a good listener. If you identified with 4 to 5, very good listener. And then 4 to 5 is good listener. And then 3 or few is poor. And we want to be able to cultivate more of those listening skills. And so wherever we fall on this list, though, the good news is that it's all about growth and developing the skill. It's something to be learned.
And that really is our hope for the rest of this episode, to explore some practical ways we can grow in our ability to listen well. So this chapter breaks things down into 3 key ways that the life of Jesus models good listening. And Carley and I are going to walk through each of these together. So the first one is this: entering into another's world. And I think that's such a beautiful starting point. So Carley, how would you describe what this looks like in practice?
Yeah, if I can, I want to kind of set it up with something Pete talks about right before this, which is distinguishing between our family of origin and the family of God. Because this is really primary. When we're entering someone else's world, which is this first step of incarnational listening, if we're entering someone else's world with our family of origins, way of entering someone's world, it might be very different than entering into it as a child of God. And so he talks about 4 things here. In the family of God, the new family of Jesus, we speak respectfully, honestly, clearly, and timely. And these 4 aspects, I think, are really important when we're moving into this first step of entering someone's world. So getting curious about what would be respectful as I enter someone else's world, what would be honest, clear, and timely, right? In therapy speak, we say like texture, tone, and timing is really important in the way that we communicate. And so this first step of entering someone else's world is like being able to hold that space with curiosity and compassion.
Yeah, I love how you framed that. Before we can really enter into someone else's world, we have to be aware of how we're entering. And that distinction between our family of origin and the family of God is such an important first step. Because if we're showing up with old patterns like maybe avoiding honesty or overstepping boundaries, we're not really listening in the way that Jesus modeled. And those 4 qualities that Pete names, speaking respectfully, honestly, clearly, and timely, really helps to reorient us. They invite us to listen with more care, more intentionality, and more alignment with who we are as children of God. So that's the first step. And the second one he names is holding on to yourself. So Carley, how would you describe this one?
Yeah, so this is where the term differentiation could be used. It's a term that allows us to recognize that we are our own person, our individual self, and then we can also be with others as individuals. And sometimes that can be really difficult. If I could draw this out for someone, it would be like a continuum, and on one end of that continuum, we have kind of overlapping circles, and we would call this enmeshment, where there's really there's no way I know where I end and you begin or another begins. And then on the other side of that continuum, we have really far apart circles. And this is almost like, I don't know how to be close to you, right? It's more disconnected because it either fears the connection itself or doesn't know how to be close without becoming enmeshed in that way. So on either side of that spectrum, we have like lack of differentiation or disconnection. And in the middle, we have this identification of what healthy togetherness can look like, right? So when we're thinking about how do I hold on to myself in relationship with another person, unhealthy togetherness oftentimes will look like wanting or expecting another person to think, feel, and act just like you do. Okay? And I don't know about those listening, but that's the context I grew up in, right? That if you didn't act, feel, think exactly how the others did in your context, then you were considered lots of different things. And there was no space for individual exploration and personal value formation. And we'll talk about values next week, but right, there wasn't that. So that creates a conflict. And then, right, if we go back to our kind of pillars of what it looks like to live in the family of God, when someone isn't thinking, feeling, or acting just like we are in unhealthy togetherness, maybe our reaction is much from our family of origin. Maybe we don't respect that person as much, or maybe we want to set them straight. Maybe our delivery is fearful in a sense, like, oh my gosh, stop doing what you're doing because it's not what we do, right? So that would be what we would call unhealthy togetherness. The other side is this differentiated state that says, I can respect another person's separateness and allow the other person to have their own thoughts, feelings, fears, and values, right? It almost is like unburdening from the false responsibility that you have to do and think and feel exactly like I do. There's this freedom there, right? I can hold on to my thoughts, my feelings, what I believe is true, and also give you the same respect to do the same, right? So I'm holding on to who I am and what I believe, think, feel. And also I can stay in a place where maybe someone else has a different thought or feeling than me. And it doesn't threaten who I am. And that's what I think holding on to myself looks like. And Jesus did this so well, right? He was able to listen and not necessarily agree. It's too, I can hold empathy and be like, wow, that's such a different experience than me. And it doesn't have to be my experience. It doesn't have to be what I agree with, but I can show respect. And unless someone's asking me what my opinion is, it's not necessarily needed. And that's one of the pieces that holding on to ourselves can help with.
Yeah, and I think the second point, holding on to yourself, really ties into what we were talking about in last week's episode on growing in emotional awareness. One of the things Pete says that really stood out to me is what I have to give to others, including the way I speak and listen, will always be directly proportional to my degree of self-knowledge. If I don't know myself, the only self I have to offer is a false self. So this idea of holding on to ourselves in relationships is so deeply connected to our own inner work of becoming aware of our emotions, growing in self-awareness, and really learning to engage with our inner worlds in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and I think about this in like a context where if we're not doing that work, like if we're not exploring our own thoughts, feelings, then we really actually need another person's thoughts, feelings, right? And beliefs about things because we're dependent on those. And that's where the tension can come in of like, well, if I need another person's, right, belief structure or value structure so I know what to do, then we don't really have an opportunity to hold space for the differences in two people, right? And then when we're not connected to other people, we maybe don't have that inner world, or that, I love that false self. It's kind of like built on other people's experiences, rather than getting curious about what I think and feel and how it might be different from someone else's.
Yeah, so good. So when we're looking at how Jesus modeled good listening in the Gospels, we see that he first modeled entering into another's world. And second, he modeled what it looks like to hold on to ourselves. And finally, this third step is learning to live in the tension between two worlds. So can you unpack this last one a little bit? What does it look like to live in that tension in a healthy and grounded way?
Yeah, I love this progression, because the tension is really a hard place to sit. I don't know if you feel that way. It's so hard.
So hard.
And yet I think it's the invitation of being a follower of Jesus, right? To I can't remember. I think it was the Bible Project. There was a great video on creative nonviolence, is kind of how they described it. And I really love that, because I think there's a tendency in our culture to swing on one end or the other, right? That polarization that we see a lot. And it's either like completely conforming on one end or completely condemning on the other end. And I don't know if either one of those is what Jesus modeled for us in Scripture, right? And so being able to hold the tension of, I can engage in a conversation or spend time with people that are different from me, hold on to myself, and also offer empathy and compassion, and not be fearful of the differences, but allowing, I believe, the Spirit of God to reveal, right? How I can learn from others, even if they're different from me, just like the humility that takes on to say, wow, I want to get curious about that person's religious experience, or how they might, do things differently in life, or where they came to understand that particular thing that I maybe disagree with. So this tension, I think, is courageous presence, to be able to stand in the middle of it and say, okay, if Jesus modeled this for me, then what does it look like to show up there with some curiosity and know that God is holding it? I have this practice that I do with my therapist often, and it's putting one hand underneath the other and just noticing, like, okay, just feeling that, right? Like feeling that there's a hand underneath me. And so I can like loosen the grip that I have on the things that I'm holding, because I know that God is holding it underneath, right? And that can take a lot of pressure off this, like, maybe fear or need to change others or to fix or to give advice, right? It's holding space in that tension.
Yeah, so good. When I think about this last one, I'm reminded of a conversation I think we had yesterday about what it really means to live in that tension and the cost that can come with it. It's not easy. Holding space for both our own world and someone else's is really difficult, but it's also the invitation that Jesus gives us to live fully alive and to stay deeply connected to ourselves and to others.
Yeah, I had this conversation the other day in a session, and there was a fear that was being brought up around, what if this is wrong? What if what I'm doing is wrong? And she kind of explained what it was. And then I said, well, what if instead of wrong, we're misinterpreting wrong for hard? Because those are two different things, right? Just because something is hard doesn't mean it's wrong. But I think sometimes if it feels hard, oh, it's wrong. Like, it shouldn't be hard. And I would say that this is that, right? This is can feel wrong.
Yes.
Right. But it's actually just maybe hard, and an invitation to invite God in to give us the strength and the awareness and the capacity to hold it.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's really important to recognize that this kind of deeper listening isn't something that most of us are naturally good at first. It takes intention and practice, but it is a skill we can grow in over time. So for someone listening who wants to begin practicing this kind of incarnational listening, where would you say is a good place to start?
Yeah. So the practice is outlined with just a few things first to keep in mind, right? Incarnational listening does feel wooden at first because you're practicing. So just like mindfully notice that. Listening does not mean you agree. We can validate someone's experience without agreeing with them. I think that's a huge misconception in our culture. Like if I validate you and I support your emotional process or your story, then I'm agreeing with everything you say, and that's just lack of differentiation. And so noticing, like, I don't have to agree. Listening doesn't mean I have to agree, but I also don't need to tell them I disagree. Well, you didn't ask, right? You're not asking. And then the listener doesn't get defensive or take things personally. So the steps with this really, we practice this in listener speaker technique. So one person gets to practice speaking and the other person gets to listening. And really it's just full attention. So body language, body position, stepping into the speaker's shoes, right? And feeling what they feel. Like, okay, maybe they said, like, I'm feeling really anxious about. Now, it doesn't matter what it's about. Just notice, like, oh, anxious. Okay, there's the feeling word, right? I know what to be anxious about something, so I can empathize with that, right? And then notice if there's any judgments or interpretations that we're having as we're listening, right? And the only skill here in incarnational listening is to reflect what you heard them say. So a phrase could be something like, so what I heard you say was this, is that correct? Or, wow, I heard, I'm noticing that you're feeling really anxious. What's that like? Right? But what it does is it notices and then it invites through more questioning. So we practice those you can use the same phrase if it's helpful over and over again. Tell me more about that, right? You could even Google reflection statements. we practice a lot in therapy. Afterward, what I like to do always, I do this at the end of every session actually. I'll say, is there anything else that needs to be said? Or is there anything more you'd like to share with me? Another phrase I use a lot is there anything else that needs to be said in order for this to feel complete? Right? Again, we're offering an invitation to me, like, I really want to hear and understand. And so anything else, just check in, see if there's anything else that I can offer. And then at the end of this process of practice, we use the phrase, of everything you have heard, what is the most important thing you want me to remember? And I love that because it goes back to really, like, what is it that you want me to take away from this conversation so that I can maybe even follow up or check back in or pray through for you or with you. So those are the practices that really can be shaped and molded to leaning into learning how to love people through listening.
And even just the way you're describing that, I think it's helpful for listeners to notice that there's actually multiple levels of listening happening all at once. Yeah. We're listening to the other person, we're listening to ourselves, and we're also listening to the Spirit. And when we can engage in all three, it facilitates this deeper connection and processing. As Dan Siegel, he's a psychiatrist, puts it, the goal is for the other person to feel felt, which he calls attunement. And I think that's such a beautiful way to describe the purpose of incarnational listening. It's not just about hearing words. It's about creating space where someone feels truly seen and known.
And something to note here, this is not a problem-solving skill. So we're going into this with the mindset of, I'm just listening. I'm not fixing, I'm not changing. That's a different skill altogether. So just giving yourself the permission to say, I'm just showing up here to be present.
Yeah, and I think there's something really powerful about realizing that listening, true incarnational listening, isn't just a skill we use in conversation. It's a reflection of how we love. It's how we show up with presence, with humility, and with a willingness to hold space for both ourselves and others. Well, thank you so much, Carley. I am really looking forward to next week.
Yes, same here.
Wasn't that so good? When we talk about incarnational listening, we're really talking about something far deeper than just hearing words. The purpose of this kind of listening is to be present at a heart level, to listen with empathy, to be attuned not just to what's said, but also what's felt. It's listening in a kind of way that the other person actually feels felt. When we engage in this kind of listening, the goal isn't to gather information. It's to create emotional connection. It's about being with someone in a way that mirrors how Jesus is with us, fully present, fully attuned, fully loving. So to wrap up today's episode, I want to leave you with a poem written by Chuck DeGroat, one that beautifully captures the heart of what we've been talking about. May your soul be spacious enough to hold the quiet tremble of another's pain. May your body listen before words emerge, and your breath keep time with the one who sits beside you. May you trust the sacred pulse between hearts, where presence softens and stories find shelter. And when your seeing is clouded, may grace clear the way, not for control, but for communion. May you be found as you find, and known as you know, for love lives here, in the stillness between. I'm so grateful that you listened to today's episode. Thank you for spending time with me. I'd love to hear from you. Connect with me on Instagram at TaylorJoy or through my website, taylorjoymurray.co. Also, if you enjoyed this conversation, it would mean so much to me if you took a minute to subscribe and review the podcast. This is an easy way to partner with me and is invaluable in reaching new listeners. Until next week.